I think London is weirdly underrated for deep tech. Make London the next deep tech hub.
Yeah.
Forever, please.
Marvin Purtorab is building AI agents that can use computers to do tasks just like we do. He's the co-founder of Convergence AI, a team working at the edge of AI research and training models that can navigate the digital world on their own. A company which was acquired just 12 months after they started. We talk about what it takes to build frontier technology, why he stayed in London instead of moving to Silicon Valley, and how autonomous agents might change the way we all work. I'm James Wise, and this is What's Next? Conversations with the founders and CEOs building the future.
All right, Marvin, great to have you here.
Great to be here.
Thanks for joining us at What's Next. You know, this video series is designed for people who are building or think about building at the frontier, building new technologies. And obviously, there is no more exciting frontier technology today than AI and specifically AI agents. And it's what you've been working on for a long time, but more specifically at Convergence, what you've been focused on for the last year. So maybe we should start with the obvious question, which is, what does Convergence do? And can you talk to us about Proxy, your frontier model series?
So at Convergence, what we're trying to do is we're trying to build agents that can kind of do general tasks. And honestly, we treated it a lot more like a research problem. We kind of thought about what can models do right now? And if they can't do it already, we don't really need to investigate that anymore. We're probably just going to assume it's going to get better at that. And then what are models quite bad at right now? And so one of the assumptions we have, if you have a general agent, when I say general, I mean an agent that can kind of do computer tasks like a human would, like white collar work, so to say. And I think there's a lot of things you can do with APIs, and you can you create a Word document with an API or whatever. But there are clearly things which we don't have APIs for, or the number of APIs has to kind of grow exponentially. And so our assumption was that probably won't happen. We won't have an infinite number of APIs, and we need some sort of unifying framework. And so we have that for humans. Humans have kind of a natural way of interacting with computers, and that's UIs. And so we were well, people are working on tool use and APIs, and they're probably going to figure it out. So we don't have to worry about it. Let's focus on UI interactions and how do we get agents to work on the UI. And so we trained these custom models that focus on interacting with the browser or the computer directly by clicking coordinates on the screen and typing and scrolling and trying to get tasks that we can get done with APIs today done by UI, and then also kind of use that to kind of chain together multiple tasks to get much more complex workflows done. And I think we were quite successful at that.
I mean, it's been benchmark beating. The times you've released Proxy has almost always been benchmark beating. But of course, these benchmarks are also very new because it's such a novel area of technology. Could you talk a little bit about how you decided to end up working at this very frontier use case and how you got up to speed with what LLMs can do and can't do?
On what LLMs can do and can't do is in a sense, since LLMs started being a thing, whatever that means, I think, 2021, 2022, I guess Andy and I have been working on LLMs at every place we've worked on, in Shopify, Cohere, at Convergence. And so I think we had a pretty good feeling for what they're good at, and also where the velocity of the space is and what people are focusing on. So we had just from our experience, a very good understanding of where things are going. One thing that we kind of thought about a lot is that because we used LLMs every day of our lives and in our jobs, they felt a lot like a tool. And I think to this day, they're still kind of like a tool that you use. Where I would like them to go is to become more, agent is the correct word, but I mean this more in I guess the dictionary definition of what an agent is, something that has a goal and can achieve things. It's more self-guided in a sense. And the main thing that we felt was missing for LLMs isn't the guide. When they reason with themselves, they can say, I would like to do the next thing. What they're most often lacking is that they're constrained by how they're interacting with the environment. They're just oh, to achieve this task, I would need to create a new slide. And then they just don't have the ability to do that. And so we need to figure out a general way for these models to have a way to interact in arbitrary ways. And UI just seemed the only way to do it. I guess robotics would be an even more out there, have the computer actually it seemed even harder, so we chose the easier route. Yeah.
And when you started working on transformer models and LLMs at Shopify and Cohere, that really was the frontiers. Like obviously post BERT, but after that really was the frontier. What drew you into that kind of area of technology? Why do you think it was fortune, or do you think it was planned that you ended up at the frontier of what has become probably one of the most important waves of technology in the world today?
I mean, if you go back like even further than that, like me ending up in machine learning, I think was kind of just luck. It was have been either that or I guess quantitative finance, which I guess today is now also machine
Yeah.
learning based, but like it's definitely 10 years behind, so to say. At some point, I decided to like stop working on like, like what back in the day would have been called like just machine learning, like neural networks, and I worked on like early generative models for molecules and stuff. And it's a super interesting field, mainly because at all these like large organizations, even 8 years back, 10 years back, it would have been the place where you have like a lot of freedom to explore because it's kind of so novel. And so that is what really stuck with me. And then at Shopify, I mean, I actually kind of joined to work on something completely different, which is like recommender systems, which, like if you get down into the weeds, like it actually is kind of the same. It's like also a very large transformer. It just doesn't predict words. But, when the LLM stuff started happening, the main skill that like everyone was looking for was like, hey, do you know how to train large models? Which like, yeah, I did because I was working on recommenders. And like, do you know how to like build large scale data jobs? And those kind of are the transferable skills that like pushed us into that direction. And so that's why we kind of stuck there.
Yeah, it's sort of those novel technologies and recommender systems, all the way back to what Spotify is working on. Netflix, used to have these big challenges around building better recommender systems. They felt kind of novel and at times like a toy. But you're completely right? They're the precursor to this wave of new technologies and next token prediction. Do you think when you hire people, or more generally when you think about founders, do you think having experiences at the frontier of these technologies in an organization is more valuable than sort of other routes, for example, academia?
I think academia kind of struggles with like a few things that you need in like the startup space. And to be fair, in machine learning, academia is kind of very watered down because kind of all research nowadays comes out of, Google and Meta and OpenAI and Anthropic. And so it's not really but academia itself, like they don't have many resources. So if you look into like do large kind of style training inference, you just can't really acquire the hard skills. You can acquire the theoretical knowledge, but you can't really have done it. And then the other thing that I think is kind of lacking in academia a lot is the urgency. I feel like we're in a space that's so fast moving. You don't really have the ability to invest 12 months to investigate something deeply. You have to like commit and execute fast. And if it doesn't work, you have to discard it. And I feel like that's not really. So I feel like, yeah, having experience in like a large organization that is focused on these areas is very helpful.
And yeah, I mean, look, I remember when we first met, and I'd come off the back of a meeting like 3 or 4 teams with stellar academic backgrounds, and even some people who worked in some of these research labs, which are part academia, part technology companies, and just getting pitch after pitch about how they were going to spend 2 years doing research to be at the frontier. And meeting you and Andy with your view that we're going to build this and we're going to ship it, and it's going to be here like as soon as you can wire the money, we're going to hire the people, we're going to get this shipped. It was very refreshing because actually, I think you're right. I think if you want to stay at the frontier, you have to build, you have to ship, even in these very novel areas of technology. Do you hire people though out of academia? Like, would you hire someone straight out of university or research lab with a PhD, perhaps?
I mean, maybe it's like a weird opinion, but like I tend to straight out of university, like people have like an undergrad or even like a master's. Yes, PhD with no work experience. I mean, probably not. Like people that are like very young tend to be kind of like very scrappy still, at least from my experience, and they will just like adapt to whatever kind of working style you give them. When you have people who have essentially 10 years of experience under the belt, like doing a PhD, they have like a way of working, and I don't really have time to like investigate 3 months if that lines up with my way of working. So.
Yeah. But it's an interesting philosophy, right? There are some great hedge funds built of just hiring people out of PhDs and focusing them on a task. Whereas I think your hiring approach has been to optimize for people who want to build and want to learn.
I think there's like a a weird thing about AI compared to quantitative finance when it comes to like these quantitative profiles that is like a lot more open-ended. Like in finance, you have a very like objective metric you're kind of optimizing for, and so like you just tell people make a number go up, and like whatever manner like way you can do it. AI is a bit different because reward hacking is so easy. It's much harder in finance. So
So obviously you started Convergence just over a year ago now. You built the team and scaled. And most recently you've joined Salesforce, which is an astonishing achievement in a short period of calendar months. But in terms of your working hours, it's actually, you've done probably more in a year than a lot of people get done in 4 or 5. Can you talk about and we'll talk more about the opportunity set, we can talk more about the challenges of building a organization at the frontier and sort of what joining Salesforce means for the future Convergence?
I think the first thing I want to like talk a bit about is like what I heard from everyone in the space is that like, oh, one of the hardest things to do is like the hiring, how will you get good talent, the talent wars. And we didn't find hiring very difficult. I think there's a lot of companies or startups that are claiming to be at the forefront, and that's why but they're not actually. That's why they're struggling to hire in the space. If you're truly doing something that like basically no one else is actually working on yet, it is very easy to get people in that are very high caliber and that want to work on exactly that field. And so we had a pretty easy time hiring. Obviously, there's like other issues with like building at the forefront, especially in AI. I mean, the hardest part is to be at the forefront is you basically have to build your own models. And it's very, very resource intensive. You need a lot of GPUs. And what this does to a company is this, it puts you in this weird spiral of like raise capital, ship the capital over to a cloud provider, try and build some models that are a bit better, and use that to justify collecting more capital to ship it to a cloud provider, which, to be honest, doesn't feel like the standard venture model. But it's just not the. I think there's one good thing about it is that like it really forces you to ship because otherwise you're not gonna raise again. On the other side, I think it does like make the company focus more on fundraising than it does on building. Because especially with GPUs, like you can always burn more money to get results faster. So it's not even like, oh, just raise twice as much and you have twice as much runway. Like, no, burn twice as much and ship twice as fast.
Yeah. And so obviously joining Salesforce gives Convergence access to
yes,
not just a wealth of experience and distribution and enterprise, but also
I mean one of the big reasons why we decided to join Salesforce is that we will have access to a lot of like computing resources basically, which is very nice, and we'll be quite independent, being set up here in London. The other thing is obviously that one of the key things with like building at the forefront especially is that you're kind of trying to sell something which doesn't really exist yet. Like it's very easy. Well, I don't know actually. I haven't sold an AI SDR, but like everyone and their mom knows what an AI SDR is. So you don't have to explain the product. You just have to show that you like deliver value.
Yeah.
For us, every sale is like we have to first explain the value and then start selling it.
Yeah.
It's a lot easier if you have direct distribution, and someone else can take that for you. And so I think that's one of the other key things. Yeah.
Yeah. And Salesforce has got one of the best sales teams in the world, obviously. You mentioned building and staying in London. You're German, spent a lot of time in America growing up, worked in Canada. Your co-founder's Canadian, worked in Canada and America. Why did you start Convergence in London?
I think London is weirdly underrated for deep tech. I can't really judge the entire startup scene, but especially in AI, in like frontier technology, deep tech, London has like really strong talent. And a lot of people in London like go to like frontier labs in the Bay Area. And if you look at like the Bay Area, a lot of the teams are like kind of 30% ex-Londoners. And so I'm not sure why that is. I think a large part is like Oxbridge, which attracts a lot of people, which then they'll get their first and second job out of school, like in the city here. And so it was very easy for us to like get great talent. Obviously, one thing you kind of have to like also mention is that it is a bit more cost effective to like get the same people in London than follow them to the Bay Area and hire the same person in the Bay Area. I also think that because it's a very like standard pipeline of like person goes like to school here or whatever, or somewhere in Europe, they get their first job in London, and then they move to the Bay Area, you can actually collect these people before they make the move. And so you actually get this like next generation talent, like kind of a job earlier, so to say. And so you actually can accelerate faster. Andy and I, weirdly enough, like this was one of the, so like, I mean, you remember us pitching, right? We had only a slide deck. One of the weird things we did analyze was like, oh, where did like the top 50 researchers that we cared about, like went to school, and where did they do like the first and second job? And it was like 35% was like London.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, it probably makes sense. 'Cause
Yeah.
Andy was very much like, oh, can we not go to the East Coast?
Yeah, I mean, we've done a similar analysis, right? You look at sort of some of the authors on even the Transformer papers, the original ones, but across AI, everywhere in the academic research, it's ETH Zurich, Oxford, Cambridge, Imperial, UCL, Edinburgh. There's a huge wealth of talent there, certainly on the academic side. And you're right. Even look, we're European investors. We also want to invest in the next generation of founders and engineers and hope to get them before they move to the Bay Area too. But did you feel pressure to move to the Bay Area? Were there any investors or hires you wanted to make who said, hey, look, you need to be here?
I think from some investors, there's definitely like, oh, can you like move to the Bay Area, or at least like, can you spend half the year in the Bay Area? Which, by the way, this seems like an even weirder proposition. Like, pick one at least.
Yeah.
For talent, honestly, we found a lot of people who were like really looking to relocate from the Bay Area more to Europe again. I think especially for like ex-Europeans, like people who have moved to the Bay Area, I think the quality of life is just different. I wouldn't say worse, but it's different. And like, there's a lot of like people talk about like, oh yeah, because there's nothing to do in the Bay Area, you work harder. People work hard here too. Like they work the same hours, but at least they get to see people walking on the streets, which like it does add. So like we found people are very like open to moving actually to Europe for work. But yeah, VCs are still very, very effort. And by the way, I mean, like I understand it. They don't want to move. They have their life set up there as well. And it objectively, it is kind of worse having to communicate over an 8-hour time difference.
It's really hard. And then, we cover the whole of Europe, and we find that difficult to make sure that we're all in the same place to debate investments and work with teams, let alone traveling sort of 12 hours, door to door. But I find it weird when I go I spend a lot of time obviously in the Bay Area in New York and meet VCs there in particular. Let's say talent, but certainly VCs. And they're like, well, everything in AI is happening in San Francisco. You're like, well, that's weird because I've been in Marvin's office with some of the best engineers in the world. And Marvin's office, by the way, overlooks DeepMind's office, who've got some of the best engineers in the world. And they're all, Isomorphics around the corner, XCX around the corner in finance. It looks like a pretty talent-dense area to me. And even Anthropic, right? MCP was announced here at Balderton's offices because Anthropic's London-based team build MCP. So you're right. I think there's possibly a bit of naivety still about what's going on here.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's also, at the end of the day, I do think there's like probably some geopolitical aspects to this whole thing. Like it's a new technology. People want it to be at home.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is what I found as well. Like London is one of the weird places where even all these frontier, so like when these frontier labs build offices in new cities, it's often like, obviously sales, operations, it's forward deployed engineers, customer success engineers. London tends to become always a research hub because there is a lot of talent. I think Paris is kind of moving that way too. But so it's like, it is kind of different. It's not just a city in Europe.
No, I wholeheartedly agree. Let's talk a little bit about the future of AI and agents, and obviously, hopefully convergences and proxies role in that. But we've seen this massive acceleration in what AI agents can do. As you said, moving beyond just generating tokens and text, but actually clicking around a computer and doing applications. Where do you feel agents are today against, the benchmarks that may matter, like a bunch of tasks that a human wants to do or could do themselves? And what are the capabilities that you foresee in the shorter time horizon, like 1 to 2 years, that we should be most focused on or most excited by?
I might be a bit of a downer, but I like looking at like the current agents, I still feel like they're very much more of a toy than like, I think you can get like very niche and very specific like things working, but for this to feel like a true coworker, I think we're actually still quite far away. I think right now they're more of an automation tool, which by the way, totally valuable, but it's not like what I would call an agent, so to say. I think over the next like 1 to 2 years, agents will obviously get smarter and they'll get like a bit better at not making the wrong thing. One of the key things I think that'll happen is that we will be able to kind of chain together different things by having like an automated system or a model, an agent, whatever, oversee kind of like a group of these agents and coordinate them in a way where the resulting system feels a lot more like something that does something autonomously, and feels a lot more end to end. And I think that'll happen very kind of quickly over the next 1 to 2 years. And then after that, I think probably the biggest, I guess, unsolved problem is like how do we get these systems to kind of like keep learning? Because relying on like the model providers to keep like retraining their models, it's fine, but it's clearly the biggest bottleneck to like getting models to truly forever kind of be valuable. And usually like if you build like fundamental infrastructure for all of humanity, usually don't rely on like a few companies to like keep it running. It's very distributed and ideally self-supporting. So
Well, we'll move on to the sort of the longer term view in a second. In the shorter term, I mean, you mentioned sort of like basically compound agent systems. Are there any sort of technical barriers to that you foresee at the moment? GRPO was a big breakthrough, and there's been others recently. And is there a technical or a scientific barrier we still need to get through, or is this just a matter of compute and data?
what we found for like computer use, what was like a huge, breakthrough in a sense was GRPO. Computer use is nice because you can kind of define the environment really well because it's just a computer. So you can just kind of train against that. I do think that like computer use will be part. I think basically what I think is going to make agents really like, feel like a tool that like people get true value out of will be like a combination of like 2 to 3 things. One is I actually do think, I mean, you can call it, say MCP, but it could also just be some other API standardization. I don't know, right? Like some sort of like standard API that a lot of companies will offer. You will need kind of computer/UI use to glue all these things in between. Because I think right now, one of the biggest failure points for agents is, let's say they have access to like I don't know, a Slack MCP or whatever, and they can like write a message and stuff. But if you would like, give like a coworker a task you'd like them to do, you might be like, oh, can you like do a thing first and then write me a message in Slack and then maybe also upload this document there. And the agent might just, because it's a niche use case, not have that MCP to like upload where you need it to be, like, I don't know, in your CRM or whatever. And to solve that, we need like a way to like catch all this like long tail of issues that like humans just naturally catch. And I think for that part, like computer use will come in. And because it's a long tail, I'm not sure that we need like much better performance. Like I think we need to get like maybe 1 order of magnitude better, which sounds like a lot, but like we can get there in like a year or two. And once we're there, I believe that we can get like agents that are really quite powerful when it comes to like day-to-day work.
Yeah.
I think one of the biggest hurdles, honestly, is not going to be like, can the agent get it done? But do we trust the agent enough to not oversee it? Because if you oversee it, it kind of defeats the purpose. And like obviously we're at Convergence are like quite confident in just letting agents do stuff, and if something goes wrong, we'll just accept that. But I think a lot of companies are not there. I think we can get to like powerful agents with the current technological stack. I think the main things that people need to work on to like make it happen faster is like build better environments to train in, generate like better data, I suppose, which in a sense is just environments nowadays. Yeah.
Yeah. On that experience of watching an agent do stuff, when you shipped, I think I was either the first non-Convergence employee or one of the first non-Convergence employees to use Proxy. And there was so much debate at the time about, wow, isn't the world going to change when AI agents can book a table at a restaurant for us? Isn't the world going to change? And I really remember using Proxy for the first time, which is the first time I'd seen an agent do it, book a restaurant for me. And I was like, go and book a table for 4 people for lunch, this kind of restaurant. I went to the OpenTable website, logged in with my details, found a website, and I was watching it like, this is magic, this is incredible. But then I was like, wait a second, I'm watching a very slow agent do something which I could do probably in like 10 seconds. And it did it. It did it. It was amazing, but it took a minute. And I was like, you know what? It's not going to be replicating a human thing that's going to change the world. In the same way that blowing through the Turing test, which we've done, humanity's achieved it, which for decades was this like pinnacle moment of achievement. That's not what the value is. The value is doing it better and doing it faster.
Yeah, I think one of the very early learnings we had at Convergence, like every lab had these like very small demos of like computer use, and we were kind of the first ones who actually shipped it, so to say. And everyone had like a ran first in the very beginning with like the same use case, like, hey, book me a restaurant, book me a flight, and all these things. And I think it's because when you're like from the outside, you're not a user, you're like the person who makes this, like, oh yeah, I can do this. It's a good use case. But in reality, like booking a restaurant is like super subjective. It's kind of like a one-off. It's not like a repeatable task you do. Like you don't book the same restaurant over and over again. It's not the right type of task that you want to automate in a weird way.
Yeah.
You want agents to do things that like you don't really want to do. And I feel like restaurant booking on the scale of things is definitely more towards I'd like doing this versus, oh, I don't want to ever do this again.
Yeah.
And so I think this is one of the biggest learnings. And then we like kind of like shifted and we went more to like enterprise and like worky use cases. And we found a lot more value in them. Like, hey, even something super simple like grab like all the Google documents that are tagged with this like 4-letter string in the beginning and summarize them into a new doc and send it to me. Yeah, that's great. I don't have to manually copy paste them all in, put them into GPT, and like it's great.
Yeah.
Like this kind of stuff is I think where agents will come in more. It's not the obvious use case. And I think that shows that like we're kind of bad at predicting like what value we're actually creating. It's very obvious that there will be value, but I don't think it's clear yet
Yeah.
what it's going to be.
Yeah, I mean, I've been immersed in using agents for, since GPT-3 really, but in the modern version of agents since Proxy came out, or at least I was given access to it. And there's areas of huge economic value which you don't think of, like emailing certain people at a conference you're going to, getting their addresses and going to email. And then some of the other stuff, like booking a hotel. Humans get a lot of pleasure from looking at hotels and thinking about a load of variables. And actually, the websites for booking hotels are pretty good, right? They're like 3 clicks to everything. And exploring that frontier, I find absolutely fascinating. I want to move on to the future of agents briefly, but before then, we are in this world now that you talked about where there is economic value to be had around very constrained agentic workflows. So, you'll have a model, you'll have maybe an MCP or an API, a bit of glue that puts it all together. So let's say, and I'm seeing a lot of companies in this space, let's say I want to get all the invoices at the end of the month from my payment system, put it into a ledger or put it into an expense system. And that's a constrained use case. Do you think this is this is a temporary period where agents aren't good enough to be trusted to sort of 5.9 reliability, and so we've created this like glue and plasters and a little bit of Lego to fix it all together, and that will go away? Or do you think actually the way humans interact with agents will always have to be with some level of constraints, like you are allowed to do this and that via an MCP or an API?
My gut feeling is that like if we can't get into the right level of like reliability, so to say, then we're like kind of fooling ourselves, telling us like how much value there actually is to be got, so to say. Like if we really think that we're never going to get to the point where we trust them like at least as much as like a coworker, like humans aren't 100% trustworthy either. Like we have to be very honest about that. They make mistakes and then we just say, okay, it's fine, you made a mistake. If we don't get there with agents, I think we are overestimating the value that they're actually going to create. I think when it comes to a lot of these narrow agents that are essentially how I call like they're just like automations in a sense, like automating a given workflow. I think there's like value to be had right now. It might be temporary in a weird way. Like if coding models keep getting better, and if it's a very narrow workflow you're automating, you might just get a model to write the workflow for you as code, like we have done in the past, so to say. Like process automation is like not super novel, and like agents are nice because they can like handle a lot of like uncertainty. But if your coding model is 10 times smarter, it probably can like codify the uncertainty as
Yeah.
well. And so in a sense, like that might be, and I don't think this will happen for like kind of more general agents, because at that point you have like coding kind of the whole world, which seems a bit far out,
Yeah.
I guess.
I mean, that's been my reaction to a lot of companies building with MCP. It makes a huge amount of sense right now, but you're in this weird world where you're saying, so we've got a superhuman coding capable agent here, but they need a very constrained environment here. I was like, well, this isn't a match. You're basically saying this coding agent isn't good enough yet, and we don't trust it. In regulated areas, maybe we have to have these guardrails in place, and then maybe MCP or APIs or whatever it is, that the right interface will be necessary or even required. But in the long run, are we always going to need that? I don't know. It doesn't feel intuitively the case.
It just doesn't feel like the type of future that we're aiming for.
Yeah.
At least like everyone in this space.
And further out, if we go to a world where we have super powerful agentic models and we have agent-to-agent workflows rather than this sort of mishmash of agent and code that we're currently operating through, what are humans going to do? Are we just going to be babysitting the agents? I'm going to be watching them book my restaurants and send invites to my conferences.
Yes, and then they can attend the conference for you too.
Yes, that'd be great.
I mean, honestly, I think it's, weirdly enough, I think much more than AI itself, like, what are humans going to do is probably the question of this century. If we do keep scaling and get to like general intelligence, I think it's very hard to say. I hope that we're not just going to be babysitting agents, because that seems like the worst possible future to kind of go for. I would hope that humans get to focus on like more higher level tasks. Frankly, I do think these models, and like, look, this is all assuming that, we don't get like some fundamental change in how these models operate and stuff, because then like all bets are kind of off. These models are kind of bad at creativity. Like, even the newer ones, which is like better at creative writing, they're good at creative writing until you have them write 5 stories. And yes, they're all better than the previous version, but they're still all the same. Just the diversity is just too low. So I think humans will have to focus a lot more on like using the innate randomness of like being a human, because we're so different, to kind of use agents to like just kind of explore more paths and get to more results faster. I think that's kind of roles that humans will occupy. I really hope that we don't just watch agents work.
I mean, I'm an optimist, and I believe that these tools, like all tools we've created historically, are going to be incredibly empowering. And I hope that many more people get the opportunity to build with them going forward than even had access to software tools in the past. But it is a different type of tool, because in some days when I'm using sort of Claude or GPT, I think of it as a tool, and some days it feels like an alien intelligence. So it's a very weird thing to navigate, where you're sitting there saying, well, this is great, it's so empowering. There's so many people who are locked out of the current economic system, or can't get a job because they haven't done 10 years at company X, and suddenly they're going to be able to do all those things because AI will enable it. But at the same time, is getting very good at a lot of things that humans currently get paid to do. So there is inevitably going to have to be a big shift in the opportunities we create for people and the opportunities people can seize.
When we get to like large scale kind of automation, I do think there will have to be like some sort of social safety net for people. I do think we're quite far off that still, to be honest. In our industry, we tend to kind of overestimate the things that agents can do. We'll get an agent to like a really impressive thing, and it'll do it like 7 out of 10 times. Getting it to 99 out of 100 times will take a lot longer. And until then, humans are needed, even if just to like kind of check. And that's fine. Like, humans can do less work. That's like, usually that's a great thing. As long as they're still like needed for things. And so I don't think we're very close to agents like being kind of replacing humans yet.
Yeah, I agree. And, it's one of those things which I mentioned earlier where we blew through the Turing test. What an incredible achievement. I watched an agent like do all of this stuff on a computer that I would normally do for the first time with Proxy. And yet, we've achieved all this, and it's broadly available software, right? It's not locked up in an R&D lab by the government, at least not in this country. It's sort of available to everyone. But like, people's energy bills are still too high. A lot of people aren't getting paid very well. There's a lot of people who can't break into the job market. A lot of people still in work they don't enjoy. There's a lot of, a huge lack of opportunities for people coming out of like education. You're sitting there being like, when's it gonna What's it going to make
mean,
all of our lives better?
I think there's like two things, right? I think we're terrible at designing tests that actually correlate with like a gain in economic value.
Yeah.
Like Turing test is cool, but like, okay, it doesn't really deliver value in that sense. I do think, and like, I live like in the middle of nowhere. Like half the people in like where I live, they don't even know what GPT is. They haven't even heard of AI. So I do think that like the largest part, and like we all live in a bubble where it's like everywhere and everyone knows about it. I do think we're going to see like huge economic gains, even just by the current state of like whatever we have propagating, because I don't think it has hit the economy at all yet. Even most large enterprises, they'll have like a private server to GPT, and half the people at like a legacy organization won't use it. Like we haven't hit like the tipping point yet, even on these tools. I think even just the current version of tools is going to be at least as big an impact as like, I guess, computers were. And we saw a huge gain in like economic value in the 80s,
and
90s.
social value, right, as well. I mean, like people can communicate more and more opportunities for people. I do think that there was a study that came out just yesterday in the UK on, I think it was like 2,000 civil servants who've been given access to a very constrained set of models to do work, and they said it saved something like 10% of their working hours. 10% of your working life is a lot, right? If you can redistribute that to earn more, spend more time with your family, do a side project, whatever it makes you happy, that's a huge economic gain. But we're talking about 3 years after GPT 3.5, and that's only a few thousand civil servants.
Considering I had to wait 4 months for my visa to be approved.
Yeah.
I think we
That's a
need
long way to go.
50% gains.
Yeah, that's a long way to go.
But like clearly, like, I mean, like, but this actually does show you that like in day-to-day life, like these small gains will translate to people's life being better. Because I'm guessing maybe if people didn't use these things, I would have waited 6 months, which is a bad place to be.
Yeah.
So I really agree with that. Like, and I cannot like overstress how much I think we're like in a bubble of the people we're around, and how little most people in this space are aware of it because they live in London or they live in the Bay Area. They don't live in like middle of nowhere. This hasn't even like began to like hit general society yet.
Maybe so final question from me, when you think about the future of hiring for Convergence and Salesforce and other organizations, what advice would you give to people today who want to work at the frontier like you have and want to be part of helping spread hopefully positive outcomes using this new technology? What should someone be doing if they want to work in this field today? What do you look for, I guess, when you're hiring?
I think there's like I think nowadays there's kind of like two routes. One is you just kind of start building stuff yourself. Nowadays with Cursor and all these things, everyone has the ability to just build something cool. And if you build something cool and you can believably show me that you actually built it and not like, you had someone else build it for you with Cursor, like I'm obviously going to hire you. Like you've done something that I think is great. That's a very strong signal. But I do actually think that probably isn't for everyone because people are in school, then in university, they might have jobs, they have a private life. They might just not have time. In that latter case, because like, lead code and all these kind of tools to actually standard interview people nowadays are like kind of deprecated. Like it's very hard to actually check. What we do nowadays is like we do a lot of interviews on like kind of work morale, and we're just very open. Like, look, man, this is going to be quite tough. Like, are you actually up for it? And saying no is completely fine. Then when we actually interview, we found that the best predictor for like on-the-job performance compared to technical interview, is that we interview like really low-level questions, like maybe on the hardware level, like stuff that's completely unrelated to your day-to-day work. Usually, unless you get like really lucky or unlucky, I guess how you view it, with your candidate, that they've specifically worked on this one random low-level thing before, it's a completely novel topic to them, and you can like observe their actual problem-solving skills. Success rates in these interviews is like in the low 10, like it's like 8 to 10%, which is completely okay. But it really, because at this point, I don't really need to check if you can like implement code well. Like GPT can do it, Claude can do it. I just need to see if you can problem solve. And so we have to find topics which are like completely foreign to people. And so that's what we tend to do. And so I would say like just try to problem solve. Don't read up on low level like like how to do stochastic rounding properly. Like if you do that, then you're kind of defeating the purpose. So I guess the interview process will shift again. But like try to problem solve or just build. And by the way, building is exactly that. Like it helps you problem solve. So that's why it's such a good predictor, because it's kind of the only skill that matters these days.
And I think that's, it's an amazing thing to say, because of this new technology, we're massively broadening the opportunity set of the number of people who can now, from first principles, work on something, whether it's building to learn or problem solving. The number of people who can do that is obviously much bigger than the number of people previously who could leak code, right? Or like really understand novel areas of statistics. So it's great. I mean, the big challenge now is making sure as many people as possible can seize the opportunity. And then for founders who are thinking about building on the frontier, what was your experience of working with venture capitalists? Obviously us, and would you recommend it?
I mean, yeah, I think founding was probably the best thing I've done. Also the worst, but definitely the best. I mean, look, like it's definitely the hardest job I've ever had. But it's like also like the best experience ever. So yeah, I mean, like if you want to found, definitely found, especially if you're in frontier tech. The nice thing about like I think working in frontier tech is that you like at the end of the day, like what your VCs do with you the first year is mainly just kind of like QA testing of the thing you built, which is a great place to be. It's not like, like build a huge sales teams and you have to expand to this new market. It's like, no, just help us build like a good product. And I think having people, in a sense, on your team that aren't just building the product is really helpful, because it brings in like an outside perspective. So yeah, I think, I mean, I would never recommend someone not found. It's like, if you're in the position to do it, you should definitely do it.
And you work with VCs again?
Yeah, of course. No, working with VCs is great.
Okay. I'll take that as a compliment.
I mean, look,
I'm the only one you worked with.
I'll be very honest, right? I don't know how accurate this is, but like, I think our experience with VCs was, first of all, very positive because I worked with you, but also like the actual process of like starting and raising and all that stuff, I feel like it was a pretty non-average process. Like it wasn't very painful. We met at like a conference. It was kind of like in a sense like a warm intro because we met in person. So I think if you start off that way, it becomes quite nice.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, look, it's been a pleasure working together. It's been incredibly exciting to be the QA for Convergence from day one, which really was most of the things.
I mean, it is that, but it's the most value you can deliver.
Yeah. And, I'm really excited about both the future of what you'll build at Salesforce and also working with companies at the frontier. So, great working together, and thanks for doing this.
Make London the next deep tech hub.
Yeah.
Forever, please. Yeah, no, it's been great working. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to What's Next. We hope you enjoyed the episode, and if you want to learn more about the frontier of deep technology in Europe today, please like and subscribe. And if you're interested in learning more about working in deep tech, look at the Balderton website to learn more about us and our portfolio companies.